Caleb Reeves didn't remember his uncle's face. He stood at the edge of the gravel driveway, keys in hand, staring at a house that looked like it had been expecting him. Not abandoned, not neglected, just waiting. The porch light was on. That was the first thing that felt wrong. He hadn't called ahead. There was no one to call. The lawyer had handed him the keys 3 days earlier, with a polite smile and a folder of documents that felt heavier than paper should. Next of kin, they'd said, as if that explained everything. Caleb stepped forward, boots crunching softly. The air smelled like pine and dust and something faintly warm, like a room that had only just been vacated. The front door opened before he could knock. Not wide, just enough that the latch slipped free under his hand. He stood there for a moment, listening. Nothing. No voices. No movement. Still, he said, "Hello?" The word sounded like it didn't belong to him. He stepped inside. The lights were already on. A lamp in the corner cast a soft yellow glow across the living room that was too orderly to be empty. A book lay open on the arm of a chair. A blanket was folded, carefully, recently, over the back of a couch. The air held warmth like someone had just walked through it. Caleb set his bag down by the door. "You left something on," he muttered, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to. The kitchen was just beyond a narrow hallway. He followed the light. There were 2 mugs on the counter. One was clean, the other held the faint ring of dried coffee at the bottom. He reached out, touched it. Still warm. Caleb pulled his hand back. He stood there longer than he meant to, eyes scanning the room, looking for something obvious. A clock, a window, anything that would explain it. Nothing did. A soft sound came from behind him. He turned. A dog sat in the doorway. Medium-sized, rough coat, something between a shepherd and a mutt. It didn't bark, didn't move, just watched him with steady, almost patient gaze. Caleb exhaled slowly. "You belong here?" The dog tilted its head slightly, then stood and walked toward him. Not cautiously, not excitedly, like it had already decided something. It stopped a few feet away, waited. "For me?" Caleb asked before he could stop himself. The dog turned and walked back down the hallway. Paused, looked over its shoulder. Caleb hesitated only a second before following. He met Eleanor Hayes 2 days later. He had taken a seat in the back of the classroom out of habit. Somewhere he could see the door, the windows, the other students without turning his head. The room smelled faintly of dry erase markers and old paper. Normal, grounded. Eleanor stood at the front, one hand resting lightly on the desk, watching the students file in a kind of quiet attention that felt intentional. When her eyes reached Caleb, they lingered just a fraction too long. Not judgmental, not curious in the usual way. Recognizing. It made him look away. Literature, she said once the room settled, at its best isn't about stories. It's about what people carry, what they choose to say, and what they don't. Caleb kept his gaze on the notebook in front of him. What we leave out, she continued, is often more revealing than what we include. Something in his chest tightened. He wrote nothing. The house didn't feel empty that night. It wasn't noise exactly. It was the sense of movement just beyond awareness. A shift in the air. The faintest impression that if he turned his head a second faster, he'd catch something standing just out of sight. The dog slept outside his bedroom door. The first night, Caleb had opened it twice, checking. Each time, the dog lifted its head, met his eyes, and settled again, like it understood the question. On the third night, Caleb stopped checking. "Your paper," Eleanor said a week later, holding a thick stack of pages, "wasn't about the assignment." Caleb leaned back in his chair slightly. "No? You wrote about a house." He shrugged. It fit. "It didn't," she said gently, "but it was honest." He didn't respond. She stepped a little closer, lowering her voice just enough that the rest of the class faded. "You described rooms in detail," she said, "the placement of objects, the way the light moves at certain times of day." Caleb felt something shift behind his eyes. "I've been there," he said. "No," Eleanor replied. "You described it before you moved in." He looked up, really looked at her this time. There was no accusation in her expression, just certainty. The dog brought him the photograph on a Thursday night. Caleb had been sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the calendar on the wall. Several dates were marked, not in words, just small, precise circles. One of them was tomorrow. He didn't know why it mattered. The dog padded into the room, something held carefully in its mouth. It placed the photograph on the table. Caleb picked it up. It was him. Younger, different haircut, standing in front of a building he couldn't immediately place. He turned it over, nothing written on the back. "How?" he started, then stopped. The dog was watching him again. Not expectant, certain. Eleanor came to the house on a Sunday afternoon. Caleb hadn't planned to ask her. The words had come out somewhere between the end of class and the parking lot, like they'd been waiting for a moment of weakness. "I think you should see it," he'd said. She studied him for a long second, then nodded. Now she stood in the doorway, taking in the same details he had. The light, the stillness, the sense of something just behind the surface. "It doesn't feel abandoned," she said. "No, it feels," she stepped inside, "occupied." Caleb watched her reaction carefully. She moved slowly through the living room, her eyes tracing the edge of things, not distracted, not afraid, observing. The dog appeared at her side. It didn't approach the way it had with Caleb. It just stood out of reach, watching her. Eleanor crouched slightly, offering her hand. The dog didn't move. After a moment, she straightened. "I don't think it's unsure of me," she said quietly. Caleb frowned. "Then what?" "It's deciding." The room was behind a door Caleb hadn't noticed before. Or maybe he had. It was hard to tell. The hallway felt longer that day. The door stood slightly ajar. "I've been down here," Caleb said, though the words didn't feel solid. Eleanor glanced at him. "Have you?" He pushed the door open. The air inside was different. Still. Heavy. The walls were covered in photographs. Caleb stopped in the doorway. Every image was of him. Different ages, different places. Some he remembered, some he didn't. Some that couldn't have been taken, not from the angles, not from the distances. Eleanor stepped in beside him. She didn't speak right away. "There's no pattern of obsession," she said finally. "No escalation, no fixation." Caleb let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Then what is it?" She turned slightly, taking in the room again. "Attention," she said. "Sustained, careful, patient attention." He swallowed. "That doesn't make it better." "No," she agreed, "but it makes it different." The journal was in a drawer beneath the photographs, leather-bound, worn. Caleb opened it. The handwriting was steady, precise. He doesn't remember. That's good. Caleb's grip tightened. It means it's working. He flipped a page. The house holds what he can't. Eleanor stepped closer, reading over his shoulder. "Keep going," she said softly. Caleb turned another page. "When the time comes, it will bring him back." The air in the room felt thinner. "I don't want to be brought back," Caleb said. Eleanor didn't answer immediately. "Back to what?" she asked. It started that night, not all at once, in pieces. Caleb stood in the living room, the photograph in his hand, the journal open on the table. The dog sat near the hallway, still as stone. The lights flickered once, then steadied. A sound moved through the house, not a noise, but a shift, like breath drawn in. Caleb pressed his hand against his temple. Something was trying to surface. Not images, weight, pressure. A sense of being somewhere else, doing something that mattered too much to forget, but that he had. "I can't," he started. Eleanor's voice came from the doorway. "Caleb?" He turned. She had come back. He didn't remember calling her. "I think it's happening," he said. She stepped inside, her gaze steady, grounding. "Stay with me," she said. The lights dimmed slightly, then brightened again. The house felt awake. Caleb staggered back a step. "It's too much," he said. "Look at me," Eleanor said. He did. "Whatever this is," she continued, "it hasn't hurt you, not once." "That doesn't mean—" "It means," she said firmly, "that you are not in danger. You're being shown something." The pressure in his head built, not pain, density, like a door bracing against being opened. "I don't want it," he said. Eleanor moved closer. "That's not the question," she said quietly. He met her eyes. "The question is," she continued, "whether you want to stay the way you are." Something in that landed, not gently, but truthfully. The room seemed to tilt. The dog stood. The hallway light flickered on. Caleb felt it then, not as a memory, not as an image, but as a pull. The house wasn't forcing anything. It was offering, returning. He closed his eyes. For a moment there was nothing. Then, a fragment, a decision. A moment where something had gone wrong. He had chosen something else to make it right, or tried to. The details stayed just out of reach, but the feeling didn't. The weight of it, the cost. Caleb's breath caught. "I'd left something behind," he said. Eleanor didn't ask what. She just stood there, present. "You don't have to carry it all at once," she said. The pressure eased. Not gone, but manageable. Caleb opened his eyes. The house was still, the light steady, the air quiet. He looked at Eleanor. "I think," he said slowly, "it was keeping it from me." She nodded. "I think so too." In the morning, the house felt different. Not empty, not occupied, complete. The calendar on the wall was blank, the circles gone. The second mug in the kitchen was clean, cold. The photograph lay where Caleb had left it, but it felt just like a photograph now, not a message. The dog sat by the door. Caleb picked up his keys. He hesitated. "Do you think it's over?" he asked. Eleanor stood beside him, her coat folded over her arm. "No," she said, "I think it's done what it was meant to do." He nodded. That felt right. The dog stood, walked past them, out the door. Caleb watched it go. "Was it ever mine?" he asked. Eleanor smiled faintly. "No," she said, "I don't think so." He looked back at the house. For the first time, it didn't feel like it was waiting, just standing. He stepped outside, closed the door behind him, and this time, it stayed closed.